welcome back to the Mirror Football podcast. Michael Owen, Chelsea, Liverpool and Arsenal are all under discussion today, and joining me to debate the big issues are the Mirror Football editor Dan Silver and the Mirror.co.uk editor Steve Anglesey. Now, we're going to start, as we seem to do with most weeks, with the Champions League demise of Liverpool. Beaten by Fiorentina in their last match to finish third in their group and fall into the Europa League. So Dan, start me off. What are their chances of winning the second-tier European competition?
I seem to say this every week, but I don't think they're as good as certainly many people in Liverpool seem to think they are. There are going to be a lot of good sides in the pot when the draw comes out. Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Wolfsburg all went in from the Champions League. Sporting Lisbon kicking around in there as well. The news that Liverpool aren't going to be seeded is going to be a massive blow to them. You know, if they pull out Juventus in the next round, then it could be all over. And Steven Gerrard's comments that they're concentrating on finishing fourth in the league, I think shows where their priorities lie. Another long cup campaign with their injury problems. I don't know how seriously they're going to treat it, and it's by no means a foregone conclusion.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, there's 2 points there. First of all, you look at the teams in the Europa League. Ruben Kazan's a case in point.
Just one bloke, and yet he's doing so well.
Indeed, he is. They gave Inter Milan and Barcelona such a hard time in that tough group, and you wonder if Liverpool came up against a side like that, a well-organised, technically proficient side, whether or not they'd struggle, and that could look even worse for them, losing to a side that not many people had even heard of before this season.
Yeah, as Dan says, there are some really good teams in that league, in the Europa League, and of course Liverpool, because they didn't finish among the 4 best third place finishers, they're not even seeded for the draw, so they could get, they can't get Fulham or Everton, right? Because you can't draw a team from your own country, but they can get Juventus. They can get the teams that Dan has mentioned. I think Valencia are in there, aren't they? With David Villa, who are going quite well in La Liga now. So it's a tall order, and
I suppose if there's a big match at the weekend and a Europa League Cup tie on a Thursday, you can bet your boots Rafa's going to play his big guns at the weekend and maybe play his squad players, the likes of Nabil El-Zar and Jay Spearing and Stephen Darby in the Europa League competition on the Thursday.
Well, absolutely, and I think he admitted as much after the defeat at Fiorentina the other night. They're going to have to cut their cloth, and it is an extremely difficult league to win, despite Liverpool's UEFA Cup adventures of old. I don't think it is going to be a great priority for them.
Just a very quick one on transfer-wise and the market in January. Players presumably won't want to go to Liverpool, will they? Because, I mean, it seems to be a sinking ship. If he gets sacked at the end of the season, a new man comes and they could well find themselves on the bench or out of the team if that new manager doesn't fancy him. Is that going to be difficult for Liverpool in the transfer window?
I mean, they're certainly not as attractive a proposition as they have been in recent years. I mean, I think you've still got to look to the history of the club, the following, the passion of the fans. I mean, you'd still rather go to Liverpool than Bolton.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think when it comes to the top players in Europe, they'll struggle. But then they haven't got the money for the top players in Europe. So I think that the whole rest of the season will be, as we said, about cloth cutting and kind of managing everyone's expectations. I think the fans will still demand a good showing in this competition. I think it'll be important for the fans to do well in Europe. And if Liverpool do suffer an embarrassing defeat, as you said, I think there will be mutiny on the terraces. Rafa still has the backing by a thin thread, but all of these things could cut that thread in an instant.
Steve, why do you think the Anfield faithful haven't yet turned on Rafa, given all of the mistakes he's made in the transfer market, their position in the league, their showing in the Champions League? Why haven't they turned on him?
Well, I think there are a couple of things, aren't there? They've won 2 under Rafa. They've won 2 cups in the most dramatic circumstances possible, in probably 2 of the greatest games that I've ever witnessed. Although Dan may disagree with the West Ham final one. So I think there's an awful lot of credit for that, even 3 years on from their last, from winning the FA Cup in Cardiff. But I just think that he's got, and he knows this, he's got a ready-made excuse in the guys who own the club, Dumb and Dumber, the two Americans, just provide him with all the ammunition he needs. He can quite easily turn around to the crowd, throw up his arms and say, what am I supposed to do? And that does hide a multitude of sins. You know, we know that he hasn't bought well. We know that instead of big players, he's preferred to buy 2 or 3 squad players. We know that Glenn Johnson's a great player, but he maybe should have looked to buy another forward. We know that he's got shit people out who could have done a job for him. Peter Crouch being a prime example. We know about the farce with Robbie Keane, where presumably he was talked into buying him by members of the dressing room, then quickly decided that he didn't fit in with his plans, and then basically humiliated him. And we know that he's taken another risk with Aquilani, who looked good when he played last night, but not match fit, probably. And there's got this really questionable injury record.
39% of the games that it was available for over the last 3 years, he's played in. So in other words, he hasn't been available for 61% of the matches that he could have played in over the last 3 years. In terms of a questionable injury record, that's right up there with the worst, isn't it?
Well, it is, and you can see that in the you know, he's a midfielder now. Fair enough, he's sitting next to Mascherano, but I don't think he didn't make a tackle for certainly the first half an hour of the game that I saw last night.
Given that he's been injured for all this time. Gal Kakuta came on against Wolves, really looked fairly special in the last half hour of that game. Aquilani, £20 million, perhaps didn't look quite in that class, did he?
No, but the problem is that there's just too much pressure heaped on him now. You know, as
shouldn't there be the £20 million?
Yeah, they're absolutely, you're right. But you know, £20 million these days, what does that get you? It doesn't even get you a full Jolien Lescott, and look at that. But because of Aquilani's terrible start with being on the sidelines, the pressure now is for him to come into the team and instantly turn their season around. And you know, he could be another Steven Gerrard, which he clearly isn't, and that still wouldn't happen. It would still need time to bed into a new league, a new team, and a completely new playing environment. So he's in an absolute lose-lose situation. Unless he scores a hat-trick against Arsenal at the weekend, then he's not going to be good enough. And I think it's going to weigh heavily on him for the rest of the season.
Leading quite neatly onto Arsenal, because Arsenal's players, their first team rested, the young players played the other night. Just a quick word on how they got on against Olympiacos.
I thought they were pretty good. This is still the Champions League when they lost 1-0, but Olympiacos are no mug. It's not like they're playing a League Two side in the Carling Cup. This is Europe's premier cup competition, and they kind of held their own. And Aaron Ramsey, I think, is going to be the real star of that side, and I think he'll move into the first team seamlessly towards the end of the season and probably start the next.
Yeah, he could well be the new Cesc Fabregas, couldn't he?
He'll have to be.
Yeah, exactly. He might well have to be. You know, but I thought the rest of them, they looked exactly what you'd expect from a team of Arsenal kids. They look very nice, pretty neat passing. But as Fergie said so many years ago, you know, the thing about Arsenal is that they won't hurt you. And once again, who are the players there that are really going to hurt somebody? Yeah. Aaron Ramsey is clearly a major talent. I'm not sure, again, having seen him a couple of times now, I'm not sure of whether Vela is going to do it. Jack Wilshere, I think everyone was expecting him to really push on this season, and he was being talked about as possible inclusion in the World Cup squad even, and he looks lightweight to me. He doesn't look like he's going to do it.
That says more about us in the media than it does about Jack Wilshere. He's a kid.
Well, exactly.
He's not going to go to the World Cup. He shouldn't go to the World Cup. He's 18.
Yeah, I think that probably sums up. And just the point you made about Vela as well, I mean, you said he looks a little bit lightweight, to use your word, but he scored that winning goal for Mexico to actually put them into the World Cup final, so he can do it. on the international stage.
That's true. I mean, he does get into good positions. I think there's no doubt about that. I think he's had a couple of really good positions over the last couple of weeks where he's been unable to finish. But he seems to be out-muscled quite a bit, and he doesn't seem to like coming up against a physical centre half. Yes. And I just wonder whether that's a continuing story with all of these sort of Arsene Wenger kids. You know?
So let's reserve judgment on their kids, but let's judge the more experienced players. How do we think they're going to do against Liverpool on Sunday?
Well, I've got to say I fancy Liverpool.
Really?
I do. I actually do fancy Liverpool. I think it will be the Aquilani hat-trick, I'm sure. You can see how desperate they are. I mean, when he came off the field last night, having made probably a 6 out of 10 debut, and was greeted with a standing ovation, and they are absolutely desperate for him to do well. But I think, you know, now that they've got Torres coming back, haven't they? They've got Gerrard, he's getting match fit. And I don't know. When I look at that table and I see Arsenal third, I do wonder how they're doing it. But clearly they're not doing it against the top sides, because they've been beaten by Manchester United. They've been beaten out of sight by Chelsea and humiliated, frankly. And they were heavily beaten by Manchester City.
But
I mean, they have beaten Tottenham, of course, but that's an incidental.
But I was just going to say, the stat from last year is that Man United beat one team in the top 4, went on to win the title. So, and Chelsea, for all of their heroics, beating the other 3 teams in the top 4, are only 2 points clear of Manchester United. So Arsenal still very much in the mix, aren't they?
Yeah, and you know, the reason they're up there is their fantastic start to the season, when they were scoring goals for fun, and you know, won 7 or 8 on the trot, and everyone was saying how amazing they were, and they're back to form. You know, all their strikers get injured, suddenly they're not so hot in front of goal, and it's no surprise that their form has tailed off. I think they'll get a draw on Sunday. I mean, it all depends on Torres, as every Liverpool game does. If Torres is fit and play, and they play well. If he isn't, then you know, it's up to Steven Gerrard to drag the rest of them around the pitch.
I should move on here, but I just want to press this a bit, because I think you're being a bit harsh on Arsenal. I think they've got lots of attacking options. I think Liverpool fans would probably crawl over broken glass for it. I think Arsenal up front, on the shoulder of the last defender against Stoke last week, was different class, and I think he could well prove the difference on Sunday.
Yeah, well, he'll have to be, because I think he's only got lots of attacking options. I think he really is their attacking option. And yes, you know, I mean, I don't think there's not many teams in the country that wouldn't have him, but again, Arsenal were relying on the one player. And I think it'll be a tense, nervy game, and I think it'll be a draw. Now watch that Aquilani hat-trick. 8-0 to Liverpool.
He doesn't look like the player who's likely to get a hat-trick, does he, to be fair? Although he looks like, is he a bit more, I mean, he's not going to score from inside his own half, but is he a bit more attack-minded than Alonso?
I think he is.
I think he probably is, isn't he?
Yeah.
Which is a good thing for them, you know.
He
looks a very graceful player, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He does look a good player.
Oh, technically, he looks very impressive. I just think that he doesn't play enough games.
Yeah.
And which is a problem that another of our subjects today has, because Michael Owen, lots of people tipping him up for the World Cup after a hat-trick against Wolfsburg the other night. For me, doesn't play enough games, and I think that's a reason why Defoe will probably go instead.
Yeah, exactly. You can't see Michael Owen forcing his way into the Manchester United starting lineup. He's just not going to do that, and I think that's going to count against him. I thought he looked against Wolfsburg. I thought, you know, the third goal was on the break at the end of the game. He did beat the guy for pace. He did work very intelligently against him when the defender caught him and cut across him, when a lot of players would just have carried on straight for goal, you know. So he cut across him and made him think about, am I going to give away a penalty, or am I going to give away a free kick and get sent off as the last man? So I think his intelligence is still there. His pace, although he did break away, is not what it was, and his positional ability, as you saw for the first 2 goals, is probably as good as it ever was, and you saw a great illustration of that in the Manchester derby. The position that he took up was magnificent.
If he can't put string games together.
Unless you're going to play week in, week out, I don't think you're going to go, you know. And you know, Emil Heskey has suffered through this and looks like he's come out the other side of it.
Dan, why, when Heskey's played up front for England, and England has scored more goals than any other European nation in qualifying, is there still this clamour for a player who cannot string games together?
Well, I mean, the problem with Heskey is that he does not score goals, and although every player that plays with him says that they love playing with him because of the space he creates and the opportunities he creates, football fans like their strikers to score goals.
Even though the team is managing to get on the score sheet, even though we qualified with such a fantastic record?
Yes, it's. I think it's a fundamental character part of the English football fan that we like our centre forwards to score goals. And you know, as much as we can appreciate the off the ball movement and the pulling of defenders all over the place, we just like to see people put it in the back of the net. And Heskey does not deliver. You know, and when you've got people like Jermaine Defoe, who, I mean, I saw him, you know, rise through the ranks at West Ham, and he was by far the best natural finisher I think I've ever seen in the flesh, certainly at that age. You know, and you've got people like him kicking their heels on the bench because Heskey is in the team. Football fans think, well, you know, what's going on here? They like to see people who can put the ball in the back of the net.
Very quickly, take him or take Michael Owen?
Would take Defoe or Owen?
Defoe or Owen?
Defoe.
Steve?
I would take Defoe. I'm unconvinced about Peter Crouch still. I just think there's something about him that international referees don't like, and I don't think he's very effective at international level.
Gives away a lot of free kicks.
Although obviously for the wag factor, I would much prefer that Abby Clancy was well in evidence. One of the interesting things about, I tell you, one of the reasons that we always talk about Michael Owen is because, I mean, it's because of Michael Owen. I thought he said a really telling thing after the hat trick the other night, where he said in interviews, he admitted that in interviews he makes a point of always saying that he's under 30, and it's almost like every interview he's doing is a kind of X Factor style appeal to Fabio, and I wonder whether he needs to put out another brochure, and just direct it straight to Fabio.
Maybe you could do a part work.
Exactly. Dorling Kindersley could do a sort of a book of mine, and he could send it straight to Fabio's house every month.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That would do it. I hope it was.
Just talk amongst themselves, and just a reminder that still to come on the Mirror Football podcast. Can Chelsea put right their blip at the weekend at home to resurgent Everton? Will Man City be able to follow up their win over Chelsea with victory at Bolton? Tough game for them. And is Sol Campbell playing with fire by admitting he'd love to move to Man United? But first, Portsmouth have released a statement saying that they've not gone into administration, but the transfer window's around the corner. Could David James be the next big player to leave the club, Steve?
Well, I think it's probably nailed on, isn't it? It's a great shame for Portsmouth. It's a great shame for Portsmouth's fans who are very loyal and have been very deserving of their success.
Great shame for Paul Hart as well.
And it is a great shame for Paul Hart, who was doing an okay job in an impossible situation. But yes. I just think that, you know, I know Harry Redknapp has got a lot of admirers in the media, and I don't think you can fail to admire the way he carries himself and the way that he manages teams and gets teams, unsuccessful teams, playing. But I do think that that anybody who goes to a club which has got the smallest, not only the smallest ground in the Premiership, there are 4 grounds in League 2, 3 grounds in League 2 and 4 grounds in League 1, which are bigger than Fratton Park. So those teams have got a bigger earning capacity than Portsmouth. And anyone who goes there and buys in David James from Manchester City, Glenn Johnson from Chelsea, Crouch from Liverpool, Defoe from Spurs, Campbell from Arsenal, Distan from City, whoever else there was, Bouba Diop from Fulham. You know, it doesn't matter if these players came on free transfers at the end of their careers, or they came on small wages, or they were on loan, on small fees, or they were loan deals. All of these guys are clearly have racked up tremendous salaries that were unsustainable for a club in that position. See, and I just wonder why this is allowed to happen again and again. We had this with Leeds United, and no one said anything, and now Leeds United are in League One.
West Ham under Egbert Magnuson.
But the difference with both those examples is this: Portsmouth went on to win something. I think you can only ever criticise managers when they spend big like that if they don't achieve any level of success.
But would you,
not only did Portsmouth go on to win something, but the fees that they managed to sell those players for is approaching £100 million. So you have to ask what the club themselves have done with that money, and I think it's a little bit unfair to maybe have a guy like Harry Redknapp for that, because Redknapp can only work within the parameters set for him by the club.
Well,
if the club
I agree, yeah.
we have the money to buy these players, then he as a manager goes out and buys them. If they don't, then he can't.
Yes, but as we know, clubs get blinded by the dangling carrot of success. I mean,
but they succeeded.
They won the FA Cup, yes, and then went into a European campaign that stretched them even further. I mean, you know, a day of glory at Wembley, and now look what's happened to them now. I mean, I'm not saying the two are inextricably linked, but there's certain causality there. I mean, as I pointed out, my own experience at West Ham, and Egert Magnuson came in and started throwing money around all over the place. People get blinded by success, and they start spending outside of their means and thinking, well, it doesn't matter because we will be successful and we will claw that money back. But the truth of the matter is there can only be 3 or 4 clubs who are successful, who get into the Champions League and who can claw that money back, and not everyone can do it. And you know, these clubs are now reaping what they sow, and they find themselves in severe financial straits for trying to outreach their grasp.
I do think it's a very heavy price to pay for an afternoon in North London, to be fair.
And I was at that game and it was rubbish. It wasn't even a good day out.
Just as Leeds, it's a very heavy price to pay. That's one of the greatest clubs in the English league, arguably in European football. And they've spent 2 years in League One, 3 years in League One, you know.
Interesting. I just wonder if it's quite a nice little segue into West Ham, because David Gold and David Sullivan have officially tabled a bid to buy the club, nominal fee. I don't think they're going to take the debt on, but they do want to invest heavily in the club. Are they good news for Upton Park fans, Dan?
Well, whether they
which you're one, of course.
The heavy side betrayed my allegiance there. I mean, only time will tell if it's good news. I mean, you know, the bid might not even be accepted, and probably won't be. I mean, it's just West Ham's luck that we've found the only billionaire with short pockets, long arms, and whose country then went bankrupt. You know, fortune is always hiding. I mean, there was a good piece in the Guardian today in which they kind of laid out what the debts were. I think there was £49 million of bank debts, £19 million owed to Sheffield United for Carlos Tevez travesty, £15 million of outstanding transfer fees, and then of course on top of that you've got whatever Alan Kirbishley rakes out of the club for his wrongful dismissal. So you know, I mean, it's a shocking case of mismanagement. I mean, I mentioned the Magnuson years when we were throwing money at has-beens and serial crocs, and it's just gone downhill from there. I mean, if Sullivan and Gold come in and if they can turn it around, then of course it would be good news. But you know, for the best that could happen there is that they've turned West Ham into Birmingham City. You know, West Ham fans want Manchester City, and we're going to end up as Birmingham City. But at the moment, you've got to say that's not a bad deal. I think a few years of stable mid-table mediocrity after what's happened already this century would do West Ham a power of good.
Now, Dan mentioned Man City. You've obviously got the money, you've got the manager, you've got the players. You're not getting the results at the moment. Last week was an oasis in a sea of green for Manchester City. Is Mark Hughes under pressure, or has he managed to maybe give himself a bit of breathing space with that win over Chelsea?
I mean, I think they've had 2 great results in a week, but I think probably the 2 best results that he's had recently have been the last 2 Inter Milan results in the Champions League.
Yes.
As I do think that if Inter Milan had dropped out of the Champions League, which looked, a racing cert after 3 or 4 games, that he would have been gone, and Mourinho would have been in his place. Who'd already given an interview discussing his desire to work with a large project with an unlimited bank account. So I think almost certainly, and I'm absolutely delighted because I do think he's the right man for the job.
Good win against Chelsea.
Yeah, excellent win, and Joleon Lescott unfairly traduced, I think, by my colleague earlier on. I thought Joleon Lescott was probably the best player on.
One good game for 25 million.
Well, he played another good game, but that was against Arsenal's teenagers. So we live to see. But
as a City fan, do you feel that your side can put together big results against the smaller teams? Because Wolves, I think, Fulham, Hull, all teams against them who've dropped points this season.
Yeah, no,
they're going to be very tough this week.
No, I don't, and this is why I still don't think that we'll qualify for the top four, because I still think that the balance of the side is incorrect. I think we've got two central defenders who are the same, and as I've the same central defenders, you need another bigger guy, a Hangeland type perhaps, who's a pure stopper. And as I said in our discussions last week or the week before, I also think that you probably need a pure left winger and not the sort of converted central strikers that are playing there at the moment.
Maybe say Frank Ribery, maybe.
Well, yeah, it could be anything. You know, I would settle for Martin Petrov, although you can't really complain with Robinho and Craig Bellamy, can you? I mean, it does seem to be. I do seem to be. I don't really like this beluga caviar. I can't have the other one. So
talking of beluga caviar, we just wonder. Manchester United being dangled in front of Sol Campbell, and he says obviously he'd like to go. Is he playing with fire a bit? When Rio, Vidic, Johnny Evans all get fit, he could well find himself on a bench kicking his heels. Maybe he might be better off going to a club where he plays regular first team football now.
I think there's worse places to be than Manchester United's bench. If I had the option as a 38-year-old now, as Sol is, I think, to be 35. Is he?
Yeah.
Goodness, it just seems to have been around forever. To kind of kick around Newcastle, trying to get them up, or to be on Man United's bench, but you're probably getting the League Cup semi-final and final teams, I would have thought.
True.
And maybe make a Champions League appearance. I mean, Ferdinand, when's Ferdinand coming back? We hear that he might not actually make it for the World Cup. So, Fergie's defensive problems are such that I think Sol Campbell would be a very good stopgap move. I mean, he's got to be a better central defender than Michael Carrick. And
well, I'll tell you what, Michael Carrick didn't do too bad against West Ham last weekend, did he?
I think as Fergie said afterwards that Patrice Evra had the world's shortest centre half. I think he could have got away with Ronnie Corbett and still kept West Ham out on Saturday.
We've just got time for a couple of quick transfer rumours because. Two doing the rounds today. One of them is Ryan Babel. Liverpool prepared to swap him with Spurs for Roman Pavlyuchenko.
Oh, I bet they are, yeah.
Who's going to get the best deal out of that?
Well, it's not going to be whoever gets Ryan Babel. I wouldn't have thought. I would have thought that's a magnificent deal for Liverpool. I really like Pavlyuchenko.
Really?
I do. I just don't think he's Harry's type of player, as was proved. As was proved when I think it was against Liverpool, wasn't it? When he told him to just go on and effing run around a bit.
That's what he used to tell Joe Cole, though, when he was a kid. That's what Harry tells everybody.
I wonder.
I really like
Ryan Babel with the run of games under his belt could prove to be a better player than people think he is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think players get unfairly stigmatised when they have bad runs at clubs, and quite often a change of club are doing a world of good. Darren Bent being the perfect example. Tottenham fans would have quite happily driven him up to Sunderland. He was made a scapegoat for their failings under Ramos, even though he's scored a hatful of goals, and he's now turning on for Sunderland. And I think both those players, the change are doing a world of good, and I think we might start seeing why those big fees were paid for them in the first place.
The other big transfer rumour doing the rounds is Blackburn going in for Ruud van Nistelrooy, surplus to requirements at Real Madrid, but obviously some very big clubs in for him anyway. Spurs, I would imagine, are one. Liverpool would be another. Arsenal ruled themselves out. Where do you see him going, Steve?
Well, I could see him at Liverpool, certainly, but I think that depends on the Pavlyuchenko thing. It's going to be one or the other. Arsenal have ruled themselves out. I'm not sure that's entirely wise. I mean, the other obvious candidates for Ruud van Nistelrooy, Cheltenham, Uttoxeter. I don't know. Over the all weather, I think he could do a job anywhere.
I thought it was nice to see Big Sam throw his hat in the ring. You know, I can't really see Rude trotting up to Ewood Park. You know, I'd quite like to see him stable down in East London, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it'd be a fantastic signing for Liverpool. I think Liverpool are genuinely interested, but we'll see. I mean, Mr. Football Spy yourself, where do you think he'll end up?
Well, I think he probably will end up at Liverpool. Spurs, I would imagine, like him. I've been at press conferences before when Harry Redknapp has absolutely gushed about him and said how good a player is even at his age. So I think
38,
34, I think he is now. But no, he scores goals. He's won 2 titles with Real Madrid, and even though he's had a big injury, I think we'll see him scoring goals sooner rather than later. As for the time being, that's all we've got time for here on the Mirror Football podcast. The Mirror's Transfer Service Football Spies, you just heard, is back in January. We're back next week for more talk on the big issues. My thanks to Steve and to Dan. We'll see you next time.